When the judge asked if my genius waitress brain could count past 10, the entire courtroom erupted in laughter. My parents laughed the loudest, their expensive lawyer sliding a photo of me in a dirty apron across the evidence table like a punchline. They thought humiliation would break me. I just stood there and watched them giggle, knowing that in exactly 20 minutes, that gavel wouldn't be silencing me. It would be ending them. My name is Sarah Mitchell. And this is the story of how I learned that the most dangerous weapon in a courtroom isn't a law degree. It's patience. But to understand how I ended up in that courtroom, you need to understand where I came from. I was 10 years old the first time I understood I was a maintenance issue rather than a daughter. It was a Tuesday in Dunhaven, Ohio. On the family Google Calendar, mounted on an iPad in our kitchen, Tuesday at 4:15 p.m. was blocked in cheerful yellow. Sarah quality time. I sat at the kitchen island, legs swinging, waiting. Our house was silent in that particular way. Expensive homes are silent. Not peaceful, sterile. Glass and steel, white marble, Italian leather that groaned when you sat on it. 4:15 came and went. At 4:35, my mother Victoria breezed in, phone pressed to her ear. She was wearing athleisure that cost more than most people's rent. She looked at me and smiled, the Instagram smile, bright and empty, then pointed to her phone and mouthed, "Just a minute." She paced the kitchen. "No, I completely understand your vision for the rebrand, but have we considered sustainability optics?" Click, click, click. Her heels marked time. I waited. At 4:45, she finally looked at the iPad. I saw the calculation happen behind her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart. I'm so sorry, but Mommy has a very important call with investors. Big people things. You understand, right?" I was 10. I understood that big people things meant you're not important enough. My father Richard walked in, checking his smartwatch. "Victoria, we need to leave for dinner." He glanced at me. "Hey, champ. Big day tomorrow. We'll do something fun this weekend, yeah?" Then they were gone. Door clicked. Alarm chirped. I was alone with my sugar packets and a tally in my notebook. 12. The 12th canceled appointment. I didn't cry. I'd learned crying didn't change anything. They weren't cruel. They didn't lock me in closets or deny me food. They just had the best organic meals delivered by whichever housekeeper they'd hired that month. They were occupied, perpetually chasing the next venture capital injection, the next gala, the next disruption. I wasn't a disruption. I was a maintenance issue. That night, lying in my $300 sheets that had never been tucked in by my mother's hands, I made a decision. If I was going to be alone, I might as well be good at it. The shift happened 3 months later, on Thanksgiving. My parents treated it like a photo opportunity. Catered food. Neither knew how to use the oven. Perfect table settings. Fall decorations arranged with mathematical precision. "Sarah, stand by the table," Victoria called, holding up her phone. "Richard, get in." Big smiles. Click, click, click. 10 minutes later, Instagram. "Grateful for family, for this beautiful life we've built." Hashtag blessed hashtag family first. The comments rolled in. "You're such great parents." "She's so lucky." We sat down. Victoria and Richard immediately discussed their patio renovation. Gas or wood-burning fire pit, teak or aluminum seating. I sat at the far end with my book. Trying to join their conversations was futile. That's when Margaret arrived. My grandmother stood in the doorway, looking like she'd been carved from oak. 72, wearing a practical wool blazer, silver hair cut short, eyes that could spot a lie across a warehouse. She didn't belong in our sleek modern house. "Mother," Victoria said, standing. "What a surprise." "I changed my mind," Margaret said simply. Her eyes swept the room and landed on me, alone with my book. Something flickered across her face. She sat down. For 20 minutes, she watched my parents discuss outdoor speaker systems, watched them completely ignore my existence. Then she set down her fork. The sound of silver on china cut the conversation. "She's dying here," Margaret said. Silence. "Excuse me?" my father stammered. "Sarah," Margaret pointed her knife at me. "She's withering." You feed her, you clothe her, but you treat her like furniture you don't know where to place." Victoria's laugh was nervous. "Mother, don't be dramatic. We give her everything." "You give her things," Margaret corrected. "You don't give her a life." She turned to me. For the first time in months, someone actually saw me. "I'm taking her back to Larkspur Falls with me." I stopped breathing. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to fight for me, waiting for them to shout, to claim they loved me too much. Instead, my father looked at my mother. My mother looked at her wine glass. I watched them run the calculation. If I left, no school runs, no housekeepers, no scheduled quality time. More time for galas, Europe, building the brand. "Well," Victoria said slowly, "it might be good for her. A more rustic environment, for a semester." "For as long as she needs," Margaret said firmly. "That might actually work," Richard nodded. "We've got Singapore next spring." "Then it's settled," Margaret cut him off. No tears, no emotional goodbye. Just relief radiating from my parents like heat off asphalt. They'd successfully outsourced a difficult project. The next morning, I loaded my suitcase into Margaret's Volvo and watched Dunhaven disappear. I didn't cry. I just thought, at least now I know what I am to them. A project. Completed. Filed away. Margaret's Victorian house was nothing like my parents' showpiece. Brick that groaned in wind, floors that creaked, radiators that clanked, papers scattered everywhere, books stacked in corners. It was cluttered, lived in. It was the first place that felt like home. "Your room is upstairs," Margaret said. "Dinner at 6:30 sharp. No phones at the table." She looked at me. "Sarah, what happened in that house wasn't your fault. You're not too anything. They're too empty to fill anyone else's cup." Something cracked in my chest. Not breaking, thawing. "But in this house," Margaret continued, "we think, we speak, we have opinions. At dinner, I'm asking what you think about the zoning laws for the new mall. Do you know anything about it?" I shook my head. "Then read the paper before 6:30. In this house, if you don't have an opinion, you're just furniture. And I've got enough furniture." That first dinner was terrifying. Margaret served pot roast, asked me questions, and actually waited for my answers. When I stumbled, she didn't check her phone or look away. She looked me in the eye and waited. For the first time, my voice had weight. One night, helping her organize files, I asked, "Why did you take me?" Margaret stopped. "Because I saw you at that table and saw myself at 10. Invisible. Trying so hard to be good enough that maybe someone would notice you were there." She pointed to a photo of herself at a warehouse. "I built my company because I was tired of asking for scraps. I won't watch my granddaughter do the same." That night, she taught me the foundation of everything. Money is a tool, Sarah, a hammer. You build with it or destroy with it. Most people think money is the house, but the moment you think you're special because you have it, you become weak. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the richest. It's the person who knows they deserve to be there even with empty pockets. I was 11 and I felt steel forming in my spine. My parents visited every 2 months like clockwork. Not because they missed me. The optics of completely abandoning your child looked bad on social media. The ritual never changed. A leased SUV would pull up. Richard and Victoria emerged in coordinated casual expensive outfits. Designer jeans, cashmere, leather jackets worth more than Margaret paid her workers monthly. They brought gifts, expensive, impersonal, a scarf I'd never wear, jewelry too flashy, books I never asked for. "Sarah!" Victoria's arms spread wide. She'd hug me carefully, can't wrinkle the outfit, and I'd smell Chanel No. 5. It smelled like visitor, not parent. Then came the camera. "Stand by the fireplace. Richard, get in." Big smiles. Click, click, click. 10 minutes later, Instagram. "Spending precious time with our brilliant girl in Vermont. So proud. Family is everything. Is blessed." Comments. "Amazing parents." "She's so lucky." "Beautiful family." Victoria read them aloud. Her validation meter filling. They'd stay for lunch, talk about their latest project. The winery, just a website. The consulting firm, never consulted. The investment opportunity, never materialized. Perfunctory questions. How's school? Making friends? Grades up? I learned to give answers requiring no follow-up. Good. Yes. All A's. After lunch, watches checked. Dinner reservations in Burlington, spa appointments, investor meetings. We should get going. Hugs. Promises to call more. They wouldn't. Reminders I could reach them. I couldn't. Then they'd leave. I'd stand on the porch watching taillights disappear, feeling that hollow sensation. Not sadness, not disappointment, just the feeling of being a prop in someone else's performance. Margaret never participated in photos. She'd stand in the doorway, arms crossed, watching with terrifying neutrality. One evening after they left, I found her in her study, holding the expensive, useless bracelet they'd given me. Why are they like this? Margaret set down her pen. Some people view others as mirrors. They only see their own reflection. If you look good, they feel good. It's not about you, Sarah. It never was. She pointed to the bracelet. That implies you're worth something to them. But value is not love. Never confuse the two. I was 14 when I won my first major debate tournament. I'd sent my parents the details 2 weeks in advance. They didn't come. Text. Sounds great, sweetie. In Cabo for detox retreat. Margaret drove me, sat in the back row with her notepad. Every time I made a good point, she nodded. Small, sharp approval. After I won, she handed me her notepad. Critiques in precise handwriting. Opening, too rushed. Authority comes from confidence, not speed. You let him interrupt twice. Never cede the floor. Closing solid, but missed opportunity to circle back. Always close the loop. Bottom. You won, but you left openings. A better opponent would have gutted you. This is what you took notes on? You know what you did well. You need to know where you're vulnerable. Praise feels good, but it doesn't make you sharper. At home, hot chocolate at the kitchen table. Your parents didn't come, Margaret said. They were in Cabo. Are you angry? No. I expected it. Expectations are armor. She set down her mug. Sarah, your parents will never love you the way you deserve. They're incapable. Not because you're lacking, because they are. They have a hole where empathy should be. So I accept that? No. You understand it. You plan around it. She leaned forward. The people who should love you don't have to, and the people who do might not be related to you at all. She gestured between us. I love you because you're curious, resilient. When I hand you criticism, you don't cry, you take notes. She drew a hammer on paper. This is money, a tool. You build or destroy. Most people think having money makes them important, but money is amplification. Generous people become more generous. Cruel people crueler. What are my parents? Hollow. They use money to create an image because there's no substance underneath. She drew a box around the hammer. You'll learn to use this properly, and remember, the tool doesn't define you. The person who knows they belong even with empty pockets, that's power. At 17, helping Margaret organize before a business trip, I found them. Bank statements scattered on her desk. File these in personal accounts, 2015. I sorted them. Then I saw the transfers. Consulting fee, R. Mitchell. Brand advisory, V. Mitchell. My parents, $10,000, $15,000. Some months, $20,000. I pulled more files, 1 year, 2, 3, monthly, like clockwork. Quick math, nearly $500,000 over 3 years. Margaret was paying my parents a salary. Margaret? She appeared, toiletry bag in hand. You found them. What are these? Transfers. To my parents. A lot. She sat. I was wondering when you'd notice. You were going to figure it out eventually. You're paying them. Yes. But they say they're entrepreneurs. They're on an allowance, have been for 20 years. The world tilted. An allowance. She pulled out another file. Failed LLCs, dissolved partnerships, near bankruptcies. Your parents have never successfully completed a business venture. The winery? A domain name and Costco wine. The consulting firm? An unused website. They lose money on everything. Then I bail them out. Every time. Because the alternative is watching them become destitute, and Victoria is still my daughter. You make them think they're working for it. Because handouts wound pride. Wounded pride makes people dangerous. This way they can pretend, tell their friends they're consultants, maintain the illusion. You're paying them to leave you alone. It's the price of my peace. I pay them to stay in Ohio and play pretend. It's blackmail. It's a lease. I'm leasing my solitude. She pulled out her will. But when I'm gone, these payments stop, and when they do, they'll come for you. The thick Harvard envelope arrived in March of my senior year. I stood in the driveway holding it, that crimson logo, the weight suggesting acceptance, not rejection. I'd applied without telling my parents. Margaret knew. Good. Aim high. Just don't tell them until you know. Inside, I opened it. I am delighted to inform you. I got in, I told Margaret in her study. She walked over, read it, looked at me with pure, uncomplicated pride. Good. Now the real work starts. No squealing, no performance, just quiet acknowledgement. When will you tell your parents? Should I? Eventually. Information is power. Share it strategically. I kept the secret 3 weeks. Then one Saturday during their visit, I left the letter on the kitchen table. A calculated accident. Sarah! Victoria grabbed it. Is this Harvard Law? Richard ran over. My God! Harvard! Harvard! Everything changed instantly. Before, perfunctory visits, daughter-shaped obligation. After, blue-chip stock that outperformed the market. Within a week, Victoria called. Actually called. Darling, we're celebrating. Coming this weekend. Nicest restaurant in Burlington. Get dressed up. Saturday, they arrived early. Victoria carried shopping bags. New outfits. You can't go to Harvard looking like, well, you need to look the part. Designer clothes, tags on. Hundreds of dollars. At dinner, Richard ordered champagne. French restaurant, no prices, absurd portions. A toast to Sarah, Harvard Law. Do you know how incredible, how proud we are? I nearly choked. Proud? They'd barely noticed I existed. We've been telling everyone. Victoria leaned in. The club is buzzing. Your daughter must be brilliant. And she is. We always knew she was special. Always knew. They'd canceled 12 quality time appointments. We need to set you up, Richard said. Good laptop, wardrobe, apartment in Cambridge. I'll be in student housing. Nonsense. A Mitchell doesn't live in a dorm. Margaret's handling financial arrangements, I lied. Flicker of annoyance crossed Richard's face. Though we'd be happy to contribute. Family investment. I smiled, said nothing. Under the table, nails dug into my palm. After dinner, photos. Me in designer clothes, them beaming like they'd personally gotten me into Harvard. That night, Instagram, celebrating our brilliant daughter's acceptance to Harvard Law. Couldn't be prouder. Hard work pays off. Hashtag Harvard bound, hashtag proud parents, hashtag raising leaders. Comments. Incredible parents. She got your intelligence. Achievement for your family. I read them that night in bed. Your intelligence, your family. As if canceled appointments and forgotten birthdays somehow contributed. Margaret knocked. Rough dinner? They're taking credit. I know. It makes me angry. Good. Hold that anger, because watch what happens when you stop being useful to their narrative. What do you mean? Right now you make them look good. Harvard's prestigious, brag-worthy. But the moment you don't fit their story, embarrass them, challenge them, stop producing achievements they can claim. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. They're using me. They've always used you. Photo op when useful, invisible when not. Now you're useful again. What do I do? Let them perform. Smile for cameras. Accept their performative generosity. And remember everything they do is transactional. When the transaction stops benefiting them, they'll disappear. She squeezed my hand. But remember this feeling. this anger, this clarity. Someday they'll need something from you, and you'll know exactly what their love is worth. How much? Whatever they can get out of it, not a penny more. Harvard was brick and ivy and doors that judged you. My classmates were brilliant, competitive, mostly from money. Legacy admits wearing privilege like second skin. I didn't fit, not legacy, not poor enough for inspiring background. Somewhere in the middle, granddaughter of successful businesswoman, estranged from wealthy adjacent parents, chip on shoulder the size of Vermont. Most classmates wanted corporate law. Big firms, $190,000 starting, 80-hour weeks, Porsche within 2 years. The thrill of the deal. I chose probate, trusts, and estates. Why dead people's money? My study partner Julian asked. Just paperwork and grieving widows, no glory. It's not about the dead, it's about the living left behind. That's where the mask falls off. I became obsessed with inheritance mechanics, advanced seminars on fiduciary duty, papers on undue influence psychology, but mostly conservatorships, when a court declares someone incapable of managing their affairs and appoints someone else. Supposed to protect the vulnerable, elderly with dementia, severe disabilities, people who can't make sound decisions. But it's one of the most abused legal mechanisms in existence. My second-year research paper, case after case of adult children using conservatorships to steal from parents, claiming mother was confused, father vulnerable to predation, friendly judge giving them complete control, bank accounts, property, portfolios, all transferred while the parent became a legal non-person. Professor's comment, excellent research, chilling conclusions, planning to practice in this area? I wrote back, planning to be ready. Second summer, while classmates fought for white shoe firms, I took a position at Northbridge Legal Collective in Boston, converted brownstone, old carpet, burnt coffee. Estate disputes for people who couldn't afford flashy firms. Families tearing apart over used Honda Civics. Siblings not speaking in 10 years, uniting solely to sue stepmother for thousands. Adult children claiming parents incompetent because they left money to charity instead of blood relatives. I learned greed doesn't scale. Desperation in a family fighting over $5,000 was exactly the same as billionaires fighting over $5 billion. The amount changes, the ugly, grasping nature stays identical. One case, elderly woman left estate to best friend of 40 years, who'd cared for her through cancer, been there daily while children were too busy. Children sued claiming undue influence. 1. Judge ruled family bonds are sacred, overturned the will. Best friend got nothing. Children divided it within a week. I watched that friend leave court, shoulders slumped, betrayed by a system valuing DNA over devotion. I thought of Margaret, of my parents. I understood what I was preparing for. I threw myself into studies. Law review editor. 3 published articles on estate litigation. Every class on evidence gathering, cross-examination, judicial conduct rules. Vermont law specifically. One-party consent for recordings. Recusal requirements for conflicts of interest. Exact procedures for judicial misconduct complaints. Friends thought I was ambitious, building a career. I was building an arsenal. Third year, clerked for Massachusetts Supreme Court Justice. Formidable woman who'd fought legal corruption her whole career. She taught me, law isn't about justice, Sarah, it's about evidence. You can be morally right and legally lose. But if you have evidence, real, documented, unimpeachable, you can make the law work. What if the judge is biased? She smiled. Then you document the bias. Make it so obvious, so egregious, they can't hide. I graduated summa cum laude in May. Richard and Victoria came. More photos, more captions about amazing parents. I accepted their congratulations with a smile, because I knew in Margaret's safe sat a sealed envelope with my name. I knew her health was declining. I knew someday the monthly transfers would stop, and I knew when they did my parents would do exactly what Margaret predicted. They'd come for me. But now I had tools, my degree, knowledge, training, deep technical understanding of how people like my parents operated and what legal mechanisms existed to stop them. I was a soldier who'd completed boot camp. I just had to wait for the war. Margaret died the way she lived, efficiently, privately, without leaving mess. October, 7 months after I passed the bar. I'd chosen estate law in Vermont, turning down Chicago and New York. Classmates thought I was crazy, but I knew why, positioning on the battlefield where I'd meet my parents. Margaret's decline wasn't dramatic, 72, slowing down. She'd sold the logistics company, good sale, fair price, simplified her life, just the Victorian house and investments. "I'm tidying up," she told me, "making sure there are no loose ends." "You're not dying soon." "Not planning on it, but planning for it anyway. That's what responsible people do." One Saturday in late September, autumn light through windows, we were in her study. She was reading Eleanor Roosevelt. I was organizing files. She set down her book. "Sarah, come here." I walked over. She reached under her chair cushion, odd place, and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with red wax, my name in her handwriting. "Take this." Heavier than expected. "What is it?" "The last tool, the hammer." I moved to open it. She stopped my hand. Firm grip. "No, not now. Not when I die. Not at the funeral." "Then when?" She looked at me, fierce fire in her eyes. "Only when you're in a room full of people laughing at you, when they think they've won, when they've stripped you to nothing and are mocking what's left." "Margaret, that sounds horrible." "It will be, but the look on their faces will be worth it." "I don't understand." "Because the greatest gift you give your enemies is the illusion of victory. Let them celebrate, let them gloat, let them become careless." She squeezed my hand. "Then, when they're standing at the cliff they dug for you, you show them this. And watch them fall. This is evidence. This is evidence of everything, but it only has power if you use it at the right moment. Too early they'll recover, but if you wait, if you let them commit fully, this becomes the kill shot." "You're teaching me to be ruthless." "No, strategic. Ruthlessness is cruelty for its own sake. Strategy is precision in service of justice." She looked suddenly tired. "They're coming for you, Sarah. When I'm gone and money stops, they'll panic. Panicked people do desperate things." "I can handle them." "I know. That's why I'm giving you this. But trust the process. Let them make their move. Let them think they're winning." "It's going to hurt." "Pain is temporary. Victory is permanent." "Which matters more?" That was October 4th. October 15th, Margaret passed peacefully in her sleep. Book closed on nightstand, glasses folded on top, like she'd checked everything off her list and put down her pen. I was in Boston when Agnes the housekeeper called. "Miss Mitchell, I'm so sorry." "She passed sometime in the night." "Peacefully." I pulled over. Sat there watching traffic, feeling something vast and empty open inside. The only person who'd ever seen me was gone. 3 hours north to Larkspur Falls. Don't remember a single mile. When I pulled in, I saw the familiar black SUV already there. Richard and Victoria, already inside. I braced myself, got out, walked to the door. The house smelled like lemon polish and aggressive activity. Found Victoria in the dining room, not weeping in Margaret's chair, not looking at photos, standing by the china cabinet, holding a saucer to the light, checking for cracks. "Oh, Sarah, you made it. Traffic must have been nightmare." She hugged me. 2 seconds. Vanilla perfume masking everything. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know she was your mother." "Yes, difficult woman, but family." Glanced toward the study. "Your father's going through paperwork. Mother was so secretive. We have no idea where she kept insurance policies." 8 hours since Margaret died. Body barely at the funeral home. They were already hunting. Found Richard behind Margaret's desk, rifling through drawers. When I entered, he slammed one shut too quickly. "Sarah, sad day. Very sad. But we have to be practical. Life goes on." Over his shoulder, files labeled property deeds, investment summaries. They weren't mourning, they were appraising. "Have you called Thomas Warren?" "Left a message. Small-town lawyers, probably fishing. We need a forensic accountant. Make sure everything's accounted for." Accounted for? Victoria drifted in. Mother was getting old. Who knows what she gave away or misplaced? We need to secure the assets for the family. For the family? As if I wasn't standing right there. I looked at them. Richard in expensive casual clothes, mentally dividing the estate. Victoria with practiced concern, thinking which furniture would look good in their house. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. Margaret was right. They hadn't come to mourn. They'd come to scavenge. Margaret left specific funeral instructions in her desk. Closed casket, simple chapel service, wildflowers, no eulogy, no fanfare. I'm not interested in people crying when they couldn't be bothered to visit while I was alive. Give me a quiet exit. My parents ignored everything. We can't have wildflowers, Victoria hissed. People will think we're destitute. The Mitchell name means something. Standards. They rented the largest hall, imported hundreds of lilies from New York, cloying, suffocating scent, hired corporate gala caterers. The funeral looked like a networking event. Richard's eulogy. I sat front row, knuckles white, listening to him rewrite history. Margaret was a pillar of strength, a woman who understood family was everything. She taught us hard work, perseverance. She gave you money monthly to stay away. I know, voice catching, perfectly timed. She'd be proud seeing how her family carries her legacy, how Victoria built her consulting practice, how Sarah's making a name in law. You've never built anything but debt. He didn't mention her books, her town council debates, her quiet charity. Talked about her like a silent partner in his success story. I wanted to scream. But Margaret's voice. Silence is a mirror. Let them reveal themselves. Reception afterward. Richard and Victoria held court near the bar, accepting condolences like awards. Margaret was so lucky to have devoted children. We were the lucky ones. Victoria dabbed silk handkerchief. I stood by the kitchen, the room filled with townspeople, shop owners, librarians, mechanics. Mr. Henderson from the auto shop approached. I nod, twisting his cap. You're Sarah? I am. Your grandmother saved my life. 2 years ago, my wife got cancer. Insurance wouldn't cover treatment. I was selling the shop. Mrs. Reynolds walked in, asked how much, wrote a check. Made me swear never to tell while she was alive. Voice cracking. She did that for a lot of people. Library roof, scholarship for Miller Girl. Never wanted credit. I looked around. Nods everywhere. Librarian, principal, food bank director. Margaret quietly held this town together with her checkbook. My parents, who cashed her checks 20 years, had no idea. They thought she was a vault they'd cracked. They didn't know she was a saint. I looked at Richard and Victoria, laughing with the mayor, working the room. I touched the cream envelope in my purse. Still sealed. When you're in a room full of people laughing at you. Not yet. But I could feel it coming. The day after the funeral, we met Thomas Warren at the Juniper County Probate Court. The building was old stone, smelling of damp wool and history. Thomas Warren matched the building. 70 years old, suit out of style 20 years ago, eyes that had seen every variety of human greed and found them all boring. We sat in a small conference room, my parents on one side of the table, leaning forward, energy aggressive and hungry. I sat on the other side, leaning back. The will, Thomas said, placing a thick envelope on the table, is straightforward. Margaret was of sound mind. We updated it 6 months ago. Updated? Richard's voice sharp. She didn't mention an update. She wasn't required to, Thomas said dryly. The reading is scheduled for tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Today is just procedural review. Right. Richard drummed fingers on table. But regarding timeline, what's the standard freeze period on primary accounts? We have pressing obligations we were counting on covering with the estate's liquidity. And the house, Victoria added quickly. We need to know if we can list it immediately. Market's peaking. I stared at them, not asking about personal effects, not asking about journals, asking how fast they could liquidate her life. The probate process takes time, Thomas said carefully. Assets are frozen until the executor is appointed and debts cleared. And who's the executor? Richard demanded. I assume as her only child, I'm the natural choice. Thomas looked at him over reading glasses. The executor is named in the will. You'll find out tomorrow. My parents exchanged a look. Quick, sharp glance. A signal between conspirators. The look of people who realized the door might be locked and were already checking windows for a way in. Of course, Victoria said, smile tight. We just want everything handled competently. Margaret was getting confused at the end. We want to protect the legacy. She wasn't confused, I said, first time I'd spoken. They turned to me like they'd forgotten I was there. Sarah, sweetie, Victoria's voice dripped condescension. You were in Boston. You didn't see her day to day? She was slipping. It happens. She was sharp as a tack, Thomas said, closing his folder. I played chess with her 3 days before she died. She beat me in 20 moves. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. He stood and left. That evening, the atmosphere in the house changed. Frantic appraisal energy gone, replaced by tense, vibrating silence. My parents retreated to the guest suite early. I stayed up, wandering the house like a ghost. I went to the kitchen to make tea. The house was quiet, but old houses carry sound. Vents, floorboards. Standing by the kettle, I saw something on the notepad by the landline. The pad Margaret used for grocery lists. Top sheet in my father's jagged handwriting. A name and number. Preston Caldwell. Litigation 617-555-1999. I froze. I knew that name. Preston Caldwell was a shark. High-priced probate litigator from the city, known for tearing wills apart and destroying families for a 40% contingency fee. I looked at the date scribbled next to the name. 2 days ago, before the funeral, before the meeting with Thomas, before they had any idea what was in the will. They'd already hired a litigator. They hadn't come to mourn. They'd come to fight. A chill went through me. This was premeditated. This was a siege. Voices drifted from upstairs. I moved softly to the bottom of the stairs. We can't let it happen, Richard. Victoria's harsh whisper. I'm thinking about the debt, Victoria. We're leveraged to our eyeballs. If we don't get access within 30 days, the bank calls the loan. We lose the house in Ohio. We lose everything. It's not just the money. Victoria's voice dropped lower, filled with venom. It's her. Look at her, Richard, walking around like she owns the place with that law degree. She thinks she's better than us. She's just a kid. She's not a kid. She's a judge. She's always judged us. If she gets the money, if she gets control, she'll hold it over us. She'll make us beg. Richard, I will not be an allowance case for my own daughter. I stepped back into kitchen shadows, heart hammering. It wasn't just greed. This was about power, about ego. They weren't afraid of being poor. They were afraid of being irrelevant. Afraid the daughter they'd treated as a prop would suddenly hold the checkbook. They'd burn the entire estate before they let me control it. I looked at the notepad again. Preston Caldwell. Tomorrow wasn't going to be a reading. It was going to be a declaration of war. Thomas Warren's conference room felt smaller the next morning. My parents sat rigidly, Richard in a navy suit, Victoria in black Chanel, playing the part of grieving family. I wore simple gray, professional but modest. Thomas put on reading glasses. I, Margaret Reynolds, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils. Richard leaned forward, elbows on mahogany, already calculating. Thomas skipped preamble. To the Larkspur Falls Public Library, I bequeath the sum of $50,000. Richard nodded impatiently. Fine, charity, good for taxes. To my housekeeper, Agnes Miller, I bequeath the sum of $100,000 to be paid immediately from liquid assets. Victoria's smile twitched. $100,000 for a maid? That seems excessive. Agnes wiped her chin when she couldn't feed herself. I said quietly, It's not excessive, it's back pay. Quiet, please, Thomas said, turning the page. To my daughter, Victoria Mitchell, and my son-in-law, Richard Mitchell. They straightened up. This was it, the payday, the bailout. I bequeath a one-time lump sum payment of $250,000 each. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Richard blinked. I'm sorry. Did you say 250,000? That's correct. That's a joke. Richard's nervous laugh. That doesn't even cover our overhead for 6 months. Where's the rest? The portfolio, the equities? Thomas ignored him. This bequest is subject to a no contest clause. Should Victoria or Richard Mitchell, or any agent acting on their behalf, contest the validity of this will or seek to alter its distribution, this bequest shall be voided in its entirety, and the sum shall be donated to the Vermont Literacy Fund. She capped us, Victoria whispered, color draining. She capped us at $250,000. That's nothing. That's an insult, Thomas continued, voice rising to cut through their murmurs. And regarding the residue of the estate, including all real property, the investment portfolio currently managed by Vanguard, the ownership interest in Voss Logistics, and all personal effects. The room held its breath. I bequeath to my granddaughter, Sarah Mitchell. The room exploded. What? Richard roared, slamming his hand on the table. Everything? She left everything to her? That's impossible! Victoria shrieked, standing so fast her chair tipped over. She's 25 years old. She's a child. She doesn't know how to manage a portfolio like that. She'll ruin it in a year. Sit down, Victoria, Thomas said, voice hard. No, I will not sit down. Victoria pointed at me. You manipulated her. You were up here every weekend whispering in her ear, turning her against us. You thief! You ungrateful little thief! I sat perfectly still, hands clasped, didn't look at them. Inside, my heart hammered against ribs. Margaret's voice. Silence is a mirror. There is one more item, Thomas said, raising his voice to judicial boom. Regarding the residential property located at 44 Oak Lane, Dunhaven, Ohio. My parents stopped shouting. That was their address. Their house. That property, Thomas read, is held by the Voss Family Trust. As sole beneficiary of the trust, ownership and control of said property shall pass to Sarah Mitchell. Color didn't just drain from Richard's face. It vanished. She owns our house? Technically, Thomas removed his glasses. Margaret owned it. You've been living there rent-free for 20 years. Sarah now owns it. She has the right to evict, to sell, or to collect rent at her discretion. Victoria slowly sat back down, looked at me. For the first time, genuine fear in her eyes. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had inverted. I wasn't just rich, I was their landlord. The shouting stopped, the air changed, went from hot rage to something colder, slimier. Richard took a deep breath, loosened his tie, forced a smile onto his face. Ghastly, trembling thing. Sarah, he said, voice dropping an octave, becoming smooth and reasonable. Sarah, honey, listen. This is a lot. It's a shock. We're all emotional. I'm not emotional, I said. I'm reading a legal document. Of course, of course. He leaned toward me. But think about what this means. Massive responsibility. Millions of dollars, tax implications, management fees. It's a burden, really. You're just starting your career. You want to focus on law, not on managing property maintenance in Ohio. Victoria chimed in, voice trembling with fake sweetness. Exactly, sweetheart. We're worried about you. You know how the sharks come out when they smell money. We want to protect you. Protect me? Yes. Richard's turn. Here's what we do. Set up a family trust. A blind trust. Your mother and I act as trustees. We handle the headache, bills, investments, the house. You get a generous monthly allowance. You can live your life, travel, be a lawyer. And when you're, say, 35, more mature, we hand full control back to you. It was almost impressive how quickly they pivoted. 5 minutes ago, I was a thief. Now I was a fragile bird needing a cage for its own safety. They thought I was stupid, thought that because I was their daughter, I'd crave their approval enough to sign away my autonomy. I looked at Richard, looked at Victoria. No, I said. Richard's smile faltered. What? No, I don't need trustees. I'm a lawyer specializing in estate planning. I'm perfectly capable of hiring my own accountants. And regarding the house in Ohio, I paused, watched them hold their breath. We can discuss lease terms later. Today, I'm just accepting the inheritance. The mask fell off. Victoria's face twisted back into a snarl. You ungrateful bitch! We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me an appointment on a calendar, I said, standing. Thomas, are we done here? We're done, Thomas said, gathering papers. I walked out. Didn't look back. Heard Richard shouting at Thomas, demanding files, demanding to know about undue influence clauses. I drove back to Margaret's house, my house now, feeling strange mix of triumph and nausea. I thought it was over. I was naive. That evening at 7:30, there was a knock at the door. Not a neighbor with a casserole, a process server. Heavy-set man, bored expression, thick envelope. Sarah Mitchell? Yes. You've been served. I opened it right there in the hallway. Henshaw versus Mitchell. My parents were suing to invalidate the will, but they weren't just claiming I'd manipulated Margaret. The lawsuit was far nastier. They were claiming lack of capacity on Margaret's part, alleging she had dementia that I had hidden from them, financial predation against me. The tuition payments Margaret made for Harvard were actually loans that I had bullied her into, proving a pattern of financial abuse and undue influence. I had isolated Margaret from her family and coerced her into changing her will. I ran to my laptop, logged into my bank account. The screen flashed red. Account frozen. Contact your financial institution. My heart stopped. Credit card portal. Frozen. Savings account from my summer internships. Frozen. My phone rang. Rachel Armstrong, the lawyer I'd met at a bar association event last month. Sarah, she said, voice grave. I just saw the filing. They went to Judge Howard Brennan with an ex parte motion this afternoon. Brennan? My stomach dropped. I know that name. He golfs at Silver Crest Club, same club as your father. That's a conflict. Hard to prove unless we have evidence of them discussing the case. Brennan granted a temporary injunction, all assets frozen pending a hearing. The estate, the trust, and, because the tuition transfers went directly to your student accounts, any accounts they're claiming are co-mingled with deceased funds. Rachel, I have $2,000 in cash to my name. It's a squeeze play, she said angrily. They want to starve you out, make you so desperate you'll call them tomorrow and beg for that conservatorship settlement. They know you can't afford a defense if you can't pay a lawyer. Can you? I'll work on contingency, but Sarah, you need to survive first. Can you stay with friends? Do you have any income? I looked around Margaret's house, my house, that I owned but couldn't afford to heat. I'll figure something out, I said. I hung up, sat in the dark hallway with the lawsuit and my frozen accounts. I was a millionaire on paper and couldn't buy milk. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Not Rachel this time. A text from a number I hadn't seen in years but had saved. Jake Sullivan. Hey, Sarah. Heard about your grandmother. Really sorry. She was a good person. Jake. We'd gone to high school together in Larkspur Falls, mechanic's son who'd stayed behind while I went to Harvard. He'd been kind to me when everyone else treated me like the weird rich girl. I stared at the text, then typed back. Thank you. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Jake. Also heard your folks are making things difficult. Word travels fast in this town. Henderson mentioned they froze everything. Of course. Small town. Everyone knew everything. Jake. Look, I know this is weird timing, but I bought the old diner on 4th Street, Juniper and Rye Cafe. Just opened. I'm short-staffed for the breakfast and lunch rush. My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming. Jake. It's not legal work. It's aprons and coffee, but it pays cash daily and tips are decent. You get a free meal per shift if you need something to hold you over. I looked at my wallet on the table. $40 in cash. That was it. I looked at the lawsuit claiming I was a financial predator. I looked at my Harvard degree on the wall. And I made a choice. Sarah, do you need someone tonight? Jake, I need someone 10 minutes ago. Sarah, I'll be there in 15. I grabbed my keys, looked in the mirror, took off my professional blazer, put on jeans and a black t-shirt. I didn't look like a lawyer. I didn't look like a Harvard graduate. I looked like someone ready to work for her life. My parents wanted to shame me, wanted to starve me into submission. Okay, I whispered to my reflection. You want to play dirty? Let's get dirty. I walked out into the cold night, driving toward the smell of coffee and the only lifeline I had left. Juniper and Rye Cafe was exactly what it sounded like. Old diner on 4th Street, red vinyl booths, checkered floor, the smell of burnt coffee and possibility. Jake was behind the counter when I walked in. He looked up, smiled, genuine, not performative. Sarah Mitchell, Harvard Law, here to sling hash. Desperate times, I said. Hey, no shame, work is work. He handed me an apron, beige canvas, coffee stain on the pocket. You ever waitressed before? No. It's simple. Be nice, remember orders, don't spill hot coffee on anyone. You'll be fine. He showed me the system, table numbers, how to work the register, where the clean mugs were kept. It took 10 minutes. That's it? I asked. That's it. You're overqualified, but I'm not complaining. He looked at me seriously. Sarah, I don't know what your parents are doing, but this town knows what Margaret did for people. You need a job, you've got one. No questions asked. Something tight in my chest loosened slightly. Thanks, Jake. Don't thank me yet. Saturday breakfast rush is hell. I worked 4 hours that night. Dinner crowd, mostly regulars, older couples, families, teenagers on dates. I poured coffee, took orders, wiped tables. My feet hurt. The smell of bacon grease permeated my hair. I dropped a fork and had to get a new one from the kitchen. But at the end of the night, Jake handed me $65 cash. Tips are yours, he said. You did good. $65. It wasn't a lawyer's salary, but it was honest, it was real, and it was mine. I drove back to Margaret's house, exhausted, smelling like coffee and fryer oil. But I'd eaten, I'd worked, I'd survived, and I hadn't called my parents. That felt like a victory. The next morning, I met Rachel at her office. She was in a converted warehouse in Burlington, whiteboards covering walls, timelines, and connection maps everywhere. I sat across from her, still in my cafe clothes, because I'd worked the breakfast shift. They're trying to Britney Spears you, Rachel said, reading the motion. Arguing poverty is a symptom of mental illness. Classic classist maneuver. Can you stop it? Stop it? Rachel tossed the papers. I can shred it, but we have a problem. The judge. She turned her laptop to face me. Newsletter from Silvercrest Country Club. Photo from Autumn Gala. My father, champagne flute in hand, and standing right next to him, laughing. Judge Howard Brennan. They're friends. Golf buddies, Rachel corrected. In a county this size, that's worse. Look at the date. 3 weeks ago, week before Margaret died. They were working the ref before the game even started, I said. Exactly. Your parents knew Margaret was fading, knew the will would be a problem, so they spent last month charming the man who'd decide your fate. Is that legal? It's a conflict of interest, but proving it is hard. Marwick will claim he can be impartial, say they're casual acquaintances. Unless we have proof of them discussing the case. She leaned back. And Brennan is an elitist. I've argued before him. He hates mess. He looks at people like your parents and sees peers. He looks at people like, she gestured to my apron, like us and sees problems. So he's biased. Against the uniform. If you walk into his courtroom wearing that, he'll treat you like a child. He'll talk down to you. He'll believe every word Preston Caldwell says about your fragile mental state. She stood, started pacing. So, here's the strategy. We dress you up, expensive suit, polish you until you shine. Bring your Harvard diploma, mount it on foam board. Force him to see you as equal. I looked at the photo of my father and the judge. I thought about the man I'd seen at the cafe that morning. Baseball cap pulled low, camera hidden in his folded newspaper. Taking pictures every time I looked tired. They wanted to shame me. Wanted me embarrassed by the apron. No, I said. Rachel stopped pacing. No, I'm not dressing up. I'm going in the apron. Sarah, if I look like a lawyer, he might be careful. He might watch his words. But if I look like a waitress... Rachel's eyes narrowed. She was starting to see it. He'll get comfortable, I continued. He'll let his guard down. He won't see a Harvard graduate. He'll see a girl who wipes tables, and he'll talk to me like one. He'll humiliate you on the record. I'm counting on it. I pulled out the small digital recorder I'd bought that morning. Vermont is one-party consent. I need him to say the quiet part out loud. I need him to prove he's not judging the case, he's judging the class. Rachel looked at the recorder, then at my apron. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. You want to bait a sitting judge. I want to introduce him to the genius waitress. I stood. It's risky. If he holds me in contempt, he won't, Rachel said, because he doesn't think you're a threat. You don't fear the person bringing you coffee. She picked up her pen. Okay, we do it your way, but be warned, it's going to be brutal. Your parents will laugh. Preston will tear you apart. You have to take it. Stand there and take every insult without flinching. I thought about the 12 canceled appointments, the photos, the decades of being invisible. I've been taking it for 25 years, I said. I can take it for one more morning. Then we have a plan, Rachel said. The hearing is Friday. Don't wash the apron. There's a specific invisibility that comes with tying an apron around your waist. I learned this within 48 hours of starting at Juniper and Rye. When I walked down the street in my tailored blazers holding a leather briefcase, people made eye contact. They nodded. They acknowledged my space. But the moment I put on that beige canvas apron with the coffee stain, I became furniture, a vending machine with a pulse. More coffee, hun? A man would say, not looking up from his phone, waving his cup like I was a sensor-activated dispenser. Check, please, a woman would snap, interrupting me while I took another table's order. The work was grueling. Physical assault on the senses, hiss of espresso machine, clatter of silverware, smell of burnt bacon grease clinging to my hair like a second skin. My feet throbbed with dull, rhythmic ache that never went away. But strangely, I didn't hate it. There was clarity to the work. Carry the plate, wipe the table, smile, get paid. It was honest, a transaction where everyone understood the rules. Unlike my parents' world, where a smile was a contract negotiation and a handshake a potential stabbing, the cafe was refreshingly brutal in its simplicity. I worked the morning shift, wake at 4:30 a.m., open by 5:30. Breakfast crowd was intense. Construction workers needing coffee before dawn, nurses ending night shifts, early risers who wanted their eggs exactly right. Overqualified for pouring drip coffee, Jake said one morning, watching me organize sugar packets with military precision. I'm undercover, I told him. Don't blow my cover. But my cover was already blown. Larkspur Falls was a small town next to Dunhaven. Gossip moved faster than the internet. By my third day, I noticed the man in the corner booth. Baseball cap pulled low, jacket too warm for the heating. He ordered single black coffee and nursed it for 3 hours. Wasn't looking at his phone. Was looking at me. Every time I dropped a fork. Every time I wiped sweat from my forehead. Every time I looked exhausted. He raised a small camera hidden in his folded newspaper. Click. Daniel Cooper. Private investigator. I recognized him from his LinkedIn profile I'd looked up the night before. He wasn't here to find out if I was running a drug empire. He was building a portfolio of failure, pictures of me looking overwhelmed, close-ups of grease stains, visual evidence to present to a judge that proved Sarah Mitchell had spiraled into menial chaos. They were crafting a narrative. Look how far she's fallen. She can't handle a lunch rush. How can she handle a trust fund? I didn't confront him. I let him take the pictures. In fact, I made sure to look extra tired when I walked past his table. Let him capture the bags under my eyes. I wanted them to have exactly what they paid for. One afternoon, 2 women in yoga pants sat at table 4. They were listening to a podcast on speakerphone, loud enough for me to hear as I refilled their waters. Larkspur Lowdown, local gossip show covering football and zoning disputes. And get this, the host crackled through the speaker. The Voss granddaughter, the one supposed to get the millions? I heard she's slinging hash at Juniper and Rye. Talk about a reality check. Guess the old lady finally realized the girl couldn't handle the checkbook. From Harvard dreams to hash browns, the co-host added. Sad, really. It is sad, one of the women said, shaking her head. But honestly, Her parents are such lovely people. Victoria donated that fountain to the park. They must be devastated seeing their daughter throw her life away like this. I stood there, pitcher in hand, water dripping down the side onto my wrist. Throw her life away. To them, working to pay for food because my assets were illegally frozen was throwing my life away. To them, my parents stealing my inheritance was being devastated. I poured their water without spilling a drop. "Enjoy your lunch, ladies," I said. Voice pleasant, smile razor sharp. They didn't even look at me. "Thanks," they mumbled, already back to their phones. Daniel Cooper became a fixture. Corner booth, same time, every day. He thought he was subtle. Baseball cap, newspaper, the occasional glance. But I'd studied surveillance techniques in my criminal procedure class. I knew what to look for. He photographed me scrubbing a dried ketchup stain, hair falling from bun, looking exhausted. Me counting change from tip jar, appearing confused, I'd dropped a quarter. Me with grease stain on my jeans. Me serving a rude customer who'd snapped at me. Each photo an illustration of incompetence. Each image proof of someone struggling. I could have called him out. Could have told Jake to kick him out. Instead, I performed. When I walked past Cooper's table, I made sure my shoulders slumped slightly. Made sure he saw me rubbing my lower back like it hurt. Made sure I looked like someone barely holding it together. Get my good side, I thought as he snapped another photo. Make sure the judge sees the dirt. One morning, Jake noticed. "That guy in the corner, he's been here every day this week. Never orders food, just one coffee." "I know. Want me to ask him to leave?" "No," I said, wiping down table 3. "Let him stay. Let him take all the pictures he wants." Jake looked at me strangely. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I met his eyes. "Building a case." He didn't understand. How could he? He didn't know that every humiliating photo was evidence, that every image of me in this apron was a rope I was handing to my parents, rope they'd use to hang themselves. Cooper left at noon, like always. I watched him pack up his camera, check his phone, walk out. He'd gotten what he came for. Perfect. The narrative was taking hold. I could feel it spreading through Larkspur Falls and neighboring Dunhaven like a virus. Whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Sympathetic looks from people who thought they knew my story. At the cafe, I overheard fragments. "Such a shame." Heard she had some kind of breakdown. Her poor parents, they tried everything. The Larkspur Lowdown did a follow-up segment. I listened while wiping tables. Update on the Voss inheritance situation. Sources close to the family say Sarah Mitchell has been refusing help from her parents. They've offered to set her up with professional management, but she's apparently insisting she can handle it herself. Meanwhile, she's working at a diner. "Classic Dunning-Kruger," the co-host said. "Doesn't know what she doesn't know." Exactly. And the sad thing is, her parents are such stable, successful people. If she'd just accept their help. I scrubbed harder at a coffee ring on the counter. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the library, came in for lunch. She'd known Margaret, had spoken at the funeral about the roof donation. She sat at the counter looking at me with something like pity. "Sarah, dear," she said quietly when I brought her sandwich. Are you all right? We heard about the legal troubles." "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. It's just, Margaret would want you taken care of. If you need help, if you need someone to talk to about the stress." She thought I was falling apart. Thought the job was a sign of crisis rather than strategy. "I appreciate your concern," I said, smiling gently. "But I'm actually doing okay. I like the work." She looked at me sadly. Clearly didn't believe me. Probably thought I was in denial. When she left a 40% tip. Pity money. I pocketed it anyway. Pity spends the same as respect. That evening, a large envelope arrived at Margaret's house. Not legal papers this time, a formal invitation, heavy cream cardstock, my mother's calligraphy. "Sarah, let's stop the madness. Dinner at the Gilded Fork, Thursday, 7 p.m. Just family, no lawyers. Let's heal this. Love, Mom." I showed it to Jake the next morning. He snorted. "That's not an olive branch, that's a loaded gun." "I know," I said, tucking the card into my apron pocket. but I need them to pull the trigger while I'm watching. Thursday night at the Gilded Fork, the kind of restaurant where menus have no prices and waiters whisper like they're sharing state secrets. I wore a simple dress from the thrift store, clean but cheap. Fabric hung loosely on my frame. I wanted to look small. Richard and Victoria were already at the corner table. They looked rich, calm, benevolent monarchs of a small kingdom. "Sarah!" Victoria stood, kissed the air next to my cheek. "Oh, you look tired, darling. Sit. Please, order anything. The lobster is acceptable tonight." I sat, ordered water. "We missed you," Richard said, pouring wine. "Didn't offer me any." "This whole misunderstanding, it's been hard on your mother." "You sued me," I said quietly. "You froze my accounts." "We took protective measures," Richard corrected gently. "There's a difference." He pulled out a leather binder, slid it across the white tablecloth. "Open it." Inside, a dossier of my life since Margaret died. Photos of me scrubbing tables. Affidavits from family friends stating I'd always been emotionally fragile. Printout of my shift request from the cafe board. "This is not a life, Sarah," Victoria said softly, placing her hand over mine. Cold skin. "This is a cry for help. We can't sit by and watch you serve coffee to people we used to invite to summer parties. It's embarrassing. For you, for us." "What do you want?" I asked. "We want you to come home," Richard said. "Drop the opposition to the trust. Sign the conservatorship papers. We'll pay off your debts. Set you up in a nice Boston apartment. You can take a sabbatical. Find yourself." "And the money? Margaret's money?" "We'll manage it," Richard said, eyes gleaming. "We'll grow it, and when you're ready, truly ready, we'll discuss an allowance." I looked at them. Really looked. They didn't need the money. They had enough credit to maintain their lifestyle for years. This wasn't about finance. It was about hierarchy. They couldn't stand the idea that I, the daughter they'd neglected, the appointment on their calendar, held the power. They needed me to kneel. "And if I say no?" Victoria sighed. Tragic, theatrical. "Then we let Preston finish what he started. The hearing's next week. We have witnesses, Sarah, character assessments. We'll prove to Judge Brennan you're mentally unfit." "And he'll believe us," Richard added, "because he knows us. He knows what good stock looks like, and right now," he gestured to my thrift store dress, "you don't look like it." The recorder in my purse vibrated silently. I had it all. "I'll think about it," I said, standing. Victoria smiled. "Take your time, sweetie, but not too much. The judge doesn't like delays." I walked out into the cold November night. I didn't go home. I drove straight to Rachel's office, played her the recording. When it finished, she whistled low. That's explicit. They basically admitted they're using the judge's bias." "It's not enough yet," I said. "I need Brennan himself. I need him on record." Rachel looked at me. "The Silver Crest Club, Thursday nights the elite gather on the smoking terrace?" I knew what she was suggesting. "That's risky." "Everything about this plan is risky," Rachel said. "But if you can get Brennan conspiring with your father and Preston on tape, then it's not just bias, it's corruption." I looked at my reflection in Rachel's window, still wearing my thrift store dress, still smelling faintly of coffee and desperation. "Okay," I said, "let's go catch a judge." I left the Gilded Fork and drove straight to Rachel's warehouse office. It was nearly 9 p.m., but she was still there, whiteboards glowing in the overhead lights. "They took the bait," I said, playing her the recording from dinner. Rachel listened to my parents' threats, their explicit mention of Judge Brennan knowing them, believing them. When it finished, she leaned back in her chair. "That's good. But it's not enough." "I know. They're careful. They didn't say Brennan already agreed to rule against me, just that he knows them. Which any lawyer could argue is coincidental. Rich people know each other, golf at the same club. It's not conspiracy. It's networking." Rachel stood, pacing. "We need Brennan himself. We need him saying the quiet part out loud." I'd been thinking about this since leaving the restaurant. Thursday nights, Silvercrest Country Club, the smoking terrace. Rachel stopped pacing. "You want to infiltrate their club?" My mother mentioned Brennan by name. She's confident he'll rule for them, which means they've talked to him recently. I pulled out my phone, showed her the club's website. Thursday nights, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Cigar and Scotch social. Members only. You're not a member. No. I looked down at my thrift store dress, my worn shoes. But I can get in through the service entrance, and once I'm in, you'll be staff, Rachel finished. Invisible. Exactly. I pulled my cafe apron from my bag. A person in an apron is invisible. You're part of the architecture. Rachel studied me for a long moment. This is dangerous, Sarah. If they catch you recording, if Brennan realizes, he won't, because he won't see me. None of them will. I folded the apron carefully. They've spent weeks teaching me how to be invisible. Time to use the lesson. Rachel walked to her file cabinet, pulled out a small device. Use this instead of your phone recorder. Better quality, longer battery. But Sarah, she handed it to me, if this goes wrong, if you get caught trespassing or recording where you shouldn't be, it could destroy your case. It could get you arrested. I thought about my parents' faces at dinner, the cold calculation, the absolute certainty that I would break, would beg, would submit. Then I won't get caught, I said. Thursday arrived cold and clear. I spent the morning shift at the cafe, working my usual hours. Let Daniel Cooper take his photos. Let the town see the struggling waitress. At 6 p.m., I drove to Silvercrest. The club sat on a hill overlooking Dunhaven, all stone and timber and old money. I parked my rusty sedan between a Tesla and a Range Rover. The contrast was almost funny. I walked around to the service entrance, took a breath, put on my cafe apron over black pants and a black shirt, pulled a baseball cap low over my face, added a black face mask. COVID precautions were still common enough not to draw attention. In the dim lighting of the service areas, I'd be just another shadow with a tray. I checked the recorder in my apron pocket, fully charged, voice activated. Rachel had tested it that morning. It could pick up conversations from 15 feet away. Okay, Margaret, I whispered. Let's see if your patient's theory works. I pushed open the service door and stepped into the enemy's castle. The kitchen was chaos. Prep cooks shouting, servers rushing, the smell of expensive food and stress. No one looked twice at me. I grabbed a tray from the stack, loaded it with empty glasses, and walked with purpose. The key to infiltration isn't sneaking, it's acting like you belong. I'd learned that from Margaret. Walk into any room like you own it, and people will believe you do. The smoking terrace was accessible through the main dining room. I walked through, head down, tray balanced, past tables of well-dressed couples eating food that cost more than I made in a week, through the French doors to the terrace. Cold November air hit my face. The terrace was lit with soft amber lighting, heat lamps glowing over arranged seating areas, the smell of expensive cigars and pine needles. I scanned the crowd, 20, maybe 30 people. Men mostly, a few women, all in that expensive casual uniform of the wealthy, cashmere, tailored wool, leather that cost thousands. Then I found them, near the fire pit, high-backed wicker chairs arranged in a circle. My father, Richard, holding a crystal glass of amber liquid, Preston Caldwell, my parents' lawyer, smoking a thin cigar, and directly across from them, leaning back with the confidence of someone who owned the place, Judge Howard Brennan. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was what I needed. But I had to get close enough for the recorder to pick up their conversation. I adjusted my tray, lowered my head so the cap's brim shadowed my face. The mask covered everything from my nose down. In this lighting, I was anonymous. I moved to the table next to theirs, started collecting empty glasses, used napkins. Slow, methodical movements, like I had every right to be there, 5 feet away, 4 feet. Their voices carried in the cold air. Worried about the appeal, though, Preston was saying. I nearly dropped a glass. They were already discussing the case. I reached into my apron pocket, felt for the recorder, pressed the button. It vibrated once. Recording. Appeal? Brennan laughed. It was a wet, heavy sound. On what grounds? The girl's a mess. Did you see her in my court? Greasy hair, smelling like bacon. It was an insult to the bench. 3 feet away now, picking up a napkin, moving in slow motion. She thinks she's clever, Preston said. Thinks that apron is a shield. It's a target, Brennan said, taking a drag of his cigar. I tell you, Richard, I hate that class of people. They think the world owes them a living because they can carry a tray. No discipline, no lineage. If she can't respect the dignity of the court enough to put on a suit, she certainly doesn't have the discipline to manage a trust. My hand froze on a glass. He'd said it. Class bias. Explicit and undeniable. Richard chuckled. That's what we keep telling her. Don't worry, Brennan said, swirling his drink. I'll handle it Tuesday. I'm going to dress her down so hard she'll be begging to go back to the kitchen. We'll grant the conservatorship. You'll have control by noon. You're a lifesaver, Howard, my father said. The club appreciates it. We need to keep the riffraff out of the capital pool. Preston leaned in. Just poke her in the right spot. These service types always crack. They're brittle. Brennan grinned. Oh, I know exactly where to poke. I turned away, walked slowly, steadily, back toward the French doors. Every instinct screamed to run, but running would draw attention. 1 foot, then another, through the doors, across the dining room, into the kitchen, out the service entrance, into the parking lot, into my car. I sat there in the darkness, hands shaking on the steering wheel, not from fear, from rage. I pulled out the recorder, stopped it. The little screen showed 5 minutes, 47 seconds. I had them. I had the judge admitting class bias, promising a verdict before the trial concluded, conspiring with the plaintiff and his lawyer to poke me until I broke. I had everything. My stomach lurched. I opened the car door and vomited into the bushes. Not from fear, from disgust, from the physical reaction to seeing the rot at the core of the system I'd dedicated my life to. I drove straight to Rachel's office. Midnight, but she'd told me to come immediately if I got anything. She was waiting, pacing her office, coffee in hand. Did you? I held up the recorder. Her eyes widened. You got it? I got it all. We sat at her desk. I played the recording. Rachel's expression shifted from focused to shocked to furiously triumphant. When it ended, the office was silent for 10 full seconds. Holy shit, Rachel finally said. Yeah. Sarah, this isn't just a smoking gun. This is a nuclear warhead. She replayed a section. Listen, I'll handle it Tuesday. I'm going to dress her down so hard she'll be begging to go back to the kitchen. We'll grant the conservatorship. You'll have control by noon. He pre-decided the case, I said. He didn't just pre-decide it. He coordinated with the opposing party. He's literally telling your father what the ruling will be before hearing your defense. Rachel stood, started pacing. And the class bias, I hate that class of people. These service types always crack. Riffraff out of the capital pool. It's textbook judicial misconduct. So we use it, I said. We file a motion for recusal immediately. Get him off the case. No, I blinked. No? Rachel turned to me, eyes fierce. If we file now, Brennan recuses himself quietly. Claims sudden health issue, conflict he wasn't aware of. He steps down, gets a slap on the wrist from the judicial board. Your case goes to a new judge. The whole thing resets. But we'd have a fair judge. And your parents get time to regroup. They hire a new lawyer, maybe someone less sloppy than Preston. They rebuild their strategy. They dig in for a longer fight. Rachel sat down across from me. Sarah, we don't want a reset. We want a massacre. What are you suggesting? We wait. We let Brennan sit on that bench Tuesday. We let him start his show. We let him mock you, insult you, make every biased statement he wants. We let him dig the hole as deep as it can possibly go. Rachel pulled out a legal pad, started writing. I'll file a sealed motion tomorrow morning. Motion for judicial inquiry with evidentiary exhibit. I'll ask the clerk to hold it and only unseal if the proceedings demonstrate manifest injustice. A trap door, I said slowly. Exactly. Brennan won't see it until he steps on it. She looked at me seriously. But Sarah, this means you have to go through with the plan. You have to walk into that courtroom wearing your cafe uniform. You have to let him humiliate you. Let Preston tear you apart. Let your parents laugh. I know. You can't flinch. You can't break character. You have to be the struggling waitress right up until the moment we detonate this. She tapped the recorder. Can you do that? I thought about Margaret's envelope, still sealed in my bag, when you're in a room full of people laughing at you. I can do it, I said. Rachel nodded, opened her file drawer, and pulled out a thick folder. Then let's talk about what happens after the detonation. She spread documents across the desk. My real credentials, my real history. After you reveal the law degree, after Brennan realizes what he's done, you're going to need to move fast. Preston will try to claim you've been practicing law without disclosure, that you've been deceptive. Have I? No. You're not required to announce your credentials in a case where you're the defendant, not the attorney, but he'll try to muddy the waters. She pulled out more papers. So we're going to be ready with everything. Your bar admission, your law review publications, your clerkship letters. We're going to make it so obvious, so documented, that he can't claim you're lying. And then? Then we file formal complaints with the Judicial Conduct Board. We submit the recording. We ask for a full investigation into Brennan's relationship with your parents and every case he's presided over where they had interests. Rachel leaned back. We don't just win your case, Sarah. We end his career. The weight of that settled on me. A man's career, his reputation, his legacy. Then I thought about the recording. These service types always crack. They're brittle. He did this to himself, I said. He did, Rachel agreed. Every judge takes an oath to be impartial, to uphold the law, to treat everyone equally. Brennan broke that oath the moment he decided your uniform mattered more than your rights. She stood. Go home. Get some sleep. The hearing is Tuesday at 9 a.m. Show up at 8:45 directly from your morning shift at the cafe. Don't change. Don't shower. Let them smell the coffee and bacon grease. What about you? I'm filing the sealed motion first thing tomorrow. Then I'm preparing for war. Her smile was sharp. By this time next week, Howard Brennan is going to wish he'd never met Richard Mitchell. I drove home through empty streets, back to Margaret's house. My house. I sat in the study where Margaret used to work, pulled out the cream-colored envelope, still sealed. Not yet. Not until the courtroom. Not until the laughter. But soon. I opened my laptop, drafted an email to Jake. Need to leave early Tuesday. Have to be somewhere at 8:45. We'll work double shift Monday to make up for it. His response came immediately. No problem. Good luck with whatever you have going on. I closed the laptop, looked around the study. At Margaret's books, her maps, her life's work. I'm ready, I said to the empty room. Let them laugh, let them mock, let them think they've won. Because the look on their faces... I didn't finish the sentence, but I could almost hear Margaret's voice completing it. Will be worth it. Friday morning, Rachel called. The motion is filed and sealed. Judge's clerk has it. She knows to unseal only if she sees manifest injustice in the proceedings. Will she know it when she sees it? Oh, she'll know. Claire's been the clerk for 15 years. She's seen Brennan's bias before, but never had proof. She'll be watching Tuesday like a hawk. The weekend crawled by. I worked my shifts at the cafe, let Daniel Cooper take his final photographs, let the town whisper about the fallen heiress. Saturday afternoon, Mrs. Henderson came in, wife of the mechanic who Margaret had helped. Sarah, dear, she said quietly at the counter. I heard about Tuesday, the hearing. Word traveled fast. We're praying for you, she continued. Margaret would be so proud of how you're handling this. Working honest work instead of... She trailed off, clearly not wanting to insult my parents directly. Instead of what? Instead of acting entitled, like some people. She patted my hand. You're going to be fine. I have faith. I smiled at her. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. But inside, I thought, you have no idea what's about to happen. Monday, Rachel and I met one final time. Last chance to back out, she said. We can file a standard recusal motion, cite the club membership, ask for a new judge. It's safer. But it's not justice. No, Rachel agreed. It's not. I pulled the recorder from my bag, the recording that would end Brennan's career. Do you think I'm doing this for revenge? Rachel considered. I think you're doing this so the next person who walks into Brennan's courtroom wearing a uniform isn't automatically judged incompetent. I think you're doing this because Margaret taught you that silence enables abuse. And maybe a little revenge? Maybe a little revenge, she admitted with a smile. But the righteous kind. She opened her briefcase, pulled out my portfolio, the leather-bound folder with my Harvard degree, my bar admission, my letters of recommendation. This stays in your bag until the right moment, after Brennan commits. After he makes it clear his ruling is based on your appearance, not your capacity. How will I know when? You'll know. He'll ask a question that's really a judgment. Something like, what qualifications do you have to manage this estate? That's your cue. I took the portfolio. It felt heavier than it should. Sarah, Rachel said seriously, tomorrow is going to be brutal. Your parents will laugh. Preston will humiliate you. Brennan will treat you like a child. The gallery will mock you. It's going to hurt in ways you're not prepared for. I know. Do you? Because knowing intellectually and experiencing emotionally are different things. When you're standing there and your own mother is laughing at you. I've been preparing for this my whole life, I said quietly. Every canceled appointment, every photo op, every time they treated me like furniture. This is just the final exam. Rachel studied me, then nodded. Okay, then let's ace it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed going over the plan. Walk in wearing the cafe uniform. Check. Let them mock me. Check. Stay silent. Let Brennan commit to his bias. Check. Wait for the right moment. Check. Reveal the credentials. Check. Watch the room implode. I got up at midnight, went to Margaret's study. The envelope was still there, cream-colored, sealed with red wax. I picked it up, felt its weight. When you're in a room full of people laughing at you. Tomorrow, finally. I opened my briefcase one more time, checked the contents. Harvard Law degree, summa cum laude Massachusetts bar, admission certificate. Law review editor appointment letter, Supreme Court clerkship recommendation from Justice Patricia Morrison. My published articles on estate law and conservatorship abuse. My thesis, the weaponization of conservatorships against competent heirs. Everything that proved I wasn't just qualified, I was an expert. I also had the recorder with the club conversation, copies of the motion Rachel had filed, sealed, but I had a copy, Margaret's will, highlighted the transfers showing my parents' financial dependence, documentation of their failed businesses. Everything I needed to dismantle their case, destroy Brennan's career, and reclaim what was mine. But the real weapon wasn't any of those documents. It was patience. Margaret had taught me that the best victories come from letting your enemies defeat themselves. From giving them enough rope, enough confidence, enough arrogance that they hang themselves. I sealed the briefcase, set it by the door. Tomorrow, I would walk into that courtroom looking defeated, looking weak, looking exactly like what they expected. And then I would show them what a genius waitress brain could actually do. Tuesday morning. I woke at 4 a.m. like always, made coffee, stared at the calendar. Today was the day. I dressed in my cafe clothes, black pants, black shirt, comfortable non-slip shoes. Drove to Juniper and Rye in the pre-dawn darkness. Jake was already there, prepping for the morning rush. Big day? He asked. You could say that. You need to leave early, right? 8:30 if that's okay. Take all the time you need. He paused. Sarah, I don't know what you're dealing with, but I know it's big. Good luck. The breakfast rush was intense. Construction workers needing coffee and eggs. Early risers wanting their routines. I poured, served, cleaned, smiled. At 8:15, a customer at table 6 deliberately knocked over his water glass. Jesus, can't you be more careful? He snapped at me, though he'd clearly done it on purpose. Old Sarah would have apologized, would have scrambled to clean it up while he berated her. New Sarah. Sarah who'd recorded a judge conspiring, who had a Harvard Law degree in her bag, who was about to detonate a bomb in open court, just smiled. I'll get you another water, I said calmly. I cleaned up the spill, brought him a new glass. He grumbled, but didn't tip. I didn't care. In 2 hours, I'd never have to care about tips again. At 8:30, I clocked out. Jake handed me an envelope. Your pay for the week, in case you don't come back. I opened it. He'd added an extra $100. Jake? Hazard pay, he said with a grin. You've been dealing with some real assholes. Figured you earned it. I hugged him. Thank you for everything. Hey, you might be back tomorrow. This might all work out. Maybe, I said, but we both knew I wouldn't be back. One way or another, after today, everything would change. I drove to the courthouse. Didn't go home to change. Didn't shower. I smelled like coffee and bacon grease. My hair was in a messy bun. The apron had a fresh stain from the spilled water. I looked exactly like what they expected. A waitress who'd lost her way. I parked in the courthouse lot, checked my briefcase one more time. Everything was there. 8:45 a.m. Rachel was waiting on the courthouse steps. You ready? She asked. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, let them commit. Let Brennan show his full bias. Don't reveal until he's completely committed to the idea that you're incompetent based on your appearance. I know. And Sarah? Rachel put her hand on my shoulder. When you do reveal, don't apologize, don't explain. Just present the facts and let them speak. Margaret's first rule, I said. Never apologize for being competent. We walked up the courthouse steps together, through the metal detector. The guard looked at me oddly. Delivery entrance is around back, miss. I'm not delivering, I said. I'm the defendant. He laughed. Actually laughed. Right. Good luck with that. I walked down the hallway toward courtroom 4B, could hear the murmur of voices inside. Rachel stopped me at the door. Last chance. I thought about Margaret, about the 12 canceled appointments, about my parents laughing while a judge called me incompetent. Let's do this, I said. I pushed open the heavy double doors. The courtroom went silent. Every head turned. My parents were there at the plaintiff's table, looking pristine in designer suits. Victoria in cream Chanel, Richard in charcoal Armani. They looked like old money and good breeding. Preston Caldwell was there, checking his Rolex. Expensive suit, shoes that cost more than my monthly rent. He looked up when I entered. His eyes widened slightly. Then a smirk crossed his face. Judge Howard Brennan was already on the bench, reviewing files. He looked up over his reading glasses, his lip curled in distinct, unmistakable disgust. I walked down the aisle. My non-slip shoes squeaked slightly on the polished floor. I could feel every eye on me. On my stained apron, my messy hair, my cheap clothes. In the gallery, I recognized faces. Daniel Cooper, the private investigator, camera ready. Mrs. Patterson from the library looking concerned. Some of my parents' country club friends here for the show. Victoria's eyes were wide, not with concern, but with horror. Not because I was there, but because of what I was wearing. She looked at the apron like I'd shown up in a clown costume, like I was deliberately humiliating her. Richard leaned over to Preston, whispered something. Preston smirked, whispered back. Richard covered his mouth, hiding a smile. Judge Brennan watched me approach the defendant's table, watched me set down my battered backpack, watched me pull out the chair. It scraped loudly against the floor. Then he spoke. Ms. Mitchell, he said, his voice booming through the courtroom, designed to reach the back rows without a microphone. Did you get lost on your way to the kitchen? The courtroom chuckled. Not polite amusement, genuine mocking laughter. I stood there, hands at my sides, grease stain on my sleeve clearly visible in the fluorescent lights. No, Your Honor, I said, voice steady. I'm exactly where I need to be. More laughter. Someone in the back row actually guffawed. Brennan looked at Rachel, who was sitting at the counsel table in her professional gray suit. Ms. Armstrong, he said, I assume you advised your client about courtroom decorum? I advised her to dress appropriately for her current circumstances, Your Honor, Rachel said carefully. Well, Brennan leaned back in his chair. These are certainly circumstances. Another wave of laughter. I sat down, pulled out a legal pad and pen from my backpack, the kind you could buy at any drugstore for $2. Preston stood, buttoned his suit jacket. He was loving this. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "if it pleases the court, the plaintiff is ready to proceed." "By all means, Mr. Caldwell," Brennan said. "Let's get this over with. I have a tea time at 2. More chuckles from the gallery. I looked at Rachel. She gave me the tiniest nod. The trap was set. Brennan had already shown his hand, mocking my appearance, making assumptions about my competence, treating this hearing like an inconvenience rather than a serious legal proceeding. Everything from this point on would be evidence. I reached into my bag and pressed the button on the recorder Rachel had given me. It vibrated once. Recording. Every word, every insult, every biased statement. All of it going on the record. I looked across at my parents. Victoria was whispering to Richard, clearly upset by my appearance. Richard was trying to calm her down, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. They thought they'd already won, thought the humiliation was complete. They had no idea that the real show hadn't started yet. Preston walked to the podium, laser pointer in hand like a weapon. "Your Honor, members of the court," he began. "We are not here to disparage the defendant. We are here to save her." He clicked his remote. The screen behind the judge's bench flickered to life. And there I was, in full color, bent over a table at Juniper and Rye Cafe, scrubbing a ketchup stain, hair falling out of its bun, face exhausted. "Exhibit A," Preston announced. "Sarah Mitchell, formerly a student of promise, now struggling to maintain basic employment in the service sector." The gallery murmured, sympathetic, pitying. I sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table. Let them look, let them judge, let them commit. Because in exactly 20 minutes, every assumption they'd made was about to explode in their faces. Preston Caldwell stood at the podium like a conductor preparing for a symphony. He was immaculate. Navy suit that probably cost $5,000, shoes polished to mirrors, hair silver at the temples, distinguished, trustworthy. He held his laser pointer like a sword. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth as oil, "we are not here to disparage the defendant. We are here to save her." He clicked the remote. The screen behind Judge Brennan illuminated with my photograph. Me, at Juniper and Rye, bent over a table scrubbing dried ketchup, hair falling out of my bun, face exhausted, defeated. The image was enormous, 10 feet tall. Everyone could see every detail. "Exhibit A," Preston narrated. "Sarah Mitchell, formerly a student of promise, now struggling to maintain basic hygiene and employment in the service sector." Click. Another photo. Me counting change from my tip jar, looking confused because I'd dropped a quarter. The angle made me look desperate, like a beggar counting crumbs. "This is not a judgment of the profession, Your Honor," Preston said, walking toward the gallery, playing to the crowd. "It is an illustration of capacity, or rather, the lack thereof." Click. Financial documents on the screen. My credit card bill highlighted in red. "Overdue, 14 days. My electric bill. Second notice." "And here," Preston continued, "we have Ms. Mitchell's personal financial records. Credit card overdue, electric bill in arrears, basic obligations she cannot meet." He turned to my parents. They sat perfectly still, faces arranged in expressions of deep concern. My mother had a handkerchief. She wasn't crying, but she held it ready, waiting for her cue. "Richard and Victoria Mitchell," Preston said, his voice dropping to a sympathetic purr, "have watched their daughter spiral. They have offered help repeatedly, professional management, financial guidance, a structured path forward." Richard shook his head sadly. Victoria dabbed at dry eyes. "But she has refused every offer. And now, facing the administration of a multi-million-dollar estate, they are terrified." Preston put his hand on his chest. "Not for the money, Your Honor. For her." He clicked back to the photo of me scrubbing tables. "How can a woman who cannot remember to pay a $70 electric bill be entrusted with a portfolio of this magnitude? How can someone who looks like this—" He gestured to the screen, then to me sitting at the defendant's table. "Be trusted with financial instruments that require sophistication, planning, and executive function?" Judge Brennan leaned forward. He adjusted his glasses, looking at the photo on the screen, then at me in my stained apron. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with amusement. "It is a valid question, Mr. Caldwell," Brennan said, his voice booming. "I look at that photograph and I do not see an executive. I see a girl who is overwhelmed by a lunch rush." Preston nodded vigorously, encouraged. "Exactly, Your Honor. The defense may argue that Ms. Mitchell is independent, but we must ask, is this independence, or is this a cry for help?" "Looking at the state of her attire today," Brennan said, gesturing toward me, "I would say the cry is getting quite loud." The courtroom erupted. It started with a few titters from the back. Then my father laughed, a loud, booming guffaw, the kind he usually reserved for golf jokes. My mother joined in, a high-pitched giggle she covered with her handkerchief. Permission granted by the patriarch and matriarch, the rest of the room followed. The gallery laughed. Preston smirked. Even the bailiff's mouth twitched. They were laughing at my clothes, at my job, at the idea that I, the waitress, thought I could sit at the big table. I sat perfectly still. My hands were folded on the cheap plastic table. I didn't look down. I didn't bite my lip. I didn't show any reaction. I picked a spot on the wall behind the judge's head, the seal of the state of Vermont, and stared at it. Let them laugh, I thought. Every chuckle is a data point. Every sneer is evidence. The recorder in my pocket was running, capturing everything. I glanced sideways at my parents. My father was wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. He caught my gaze. He didn't look away. He winked. It was a small, conspiratorial wink. "Give up," it said. "Come back to us. Be our little girl again, and we'll make the bad man stop." I looked away. I would rather scrub tables for the rest of my life than return to that cage. "Mr. Caldwell," Judge Brennan said, waving a hand to settle the room, "you have made your point quite effectively. The court is inclined to agree that the current trajectory of the defendant suggests a lack of, let us call it, executive function." "Thank you, Your Honor," Preston said, sitting down with a flourish. Rachel stood up. She didn't look flashy or aggressive. She wore a simple gray suit and sensible heels. She walked to the podium without drama. "Mr. Caldwell," Rachel said, her voice sharp and clear, "you mentioned the overdue electric bill. Can you tell the court why that bill is overdue?" Preston stood halfway. "Relevance, Your Honor." "It is entirely relevant," Rachel said. "You're using it as proof of incompetence. I'm asking for the cause." "She didn't pay it," Preston shrugged. "That is the cause." "She didn't pay it," Rachel countered, "because on October 15th, your clients filed an ex parte motion to freeze every single asset she possesses, including the checking account she uses for utilities. Is that correct?" Preston stiffened. "Standard procedure in a dispute of this nature." "So," Rachel said, turning to the judge, "you break her legs and then ask the court to declare her incompetent because she cannot run. Is that the logic?" "Objection!" Preston shouted. "Argumentative!" "Sustained," Brennan said, waving a hand dismissively. "Ms. Armstrong, we understand the mechanics of the freeze, but a prudent individual would have reserves. A prudent individual would have resources." "She is 25, Your Honor," Rachel said. "She just graduated. Most 25-year-olds do not have reserves to fight a legal siege." "Most 25-year-olds," Brennan drawled, looking down at me, "get a real job. They do not play house in a diner." I felt heat rise in my neck, but I kept my face blank. Rachel glanced at me. I gave her the smallest nod. "Not yet. Let him commit more." "Your Honor," Rachel said carefully, "I'd like to call Ms. Mitchell to testify regarding her financial decisions." Brennan looked at me. "Yes, I think we all would like to hear from the defendant. Let's see if she can string a sentence together better than she can balance a checkbook." More laughter. "Call the defendant," Brennan ordered. Rachel touched my arm as I stood. "Keep it simple," she whispered. "Don't fight him yet." I stood. My chair scraped the floor, a loud, grinding sound that echoed in the silent courtroom. I walked to the witness stand. Every eye followed me. I could feel their judgment, their pity, their amusement. I climbed the steps and sat in the witness box. It was elevated. I was now looking down at my parents, but I felt smaller than I ever had. "State your name," the clerk mumbled. "Sarah Mitchell." My voice was steady, but I kept it quiet. Meek, exactly what they expected. Judge Brennan turned his chair to face me. He leaned over the bench, looming like a gargoyle. "Ms. Mitchell," he began, taking off his glasses. "I am trying to understand something. You are the granddaughter of Margaret Reynolds, a woman of industry, a woman of substance. And yet here you are." He gestured to my outfit with obvious distaste. "I work for a living, Your Honor," I said. "Work," Brennan repeated, testing the word like it was sour wine. "You serve coffee, you wipe tables. Tell me, in your line of work, do you have to make complex financial decisions? Do you have to choose between high-yield bonds and municipal securities?" "No, sir," I said, lowering my eyes. "I mostly just have to make sure the order is right." "Exactly," Brennan said, turning to the gallery with a knowing smile. "You follow orders, you do not give them. You perform rote tasks, repetitive, simple." "It is honest work," I said softly. "I am sure it is," Brennan said condescendingly. "Digging ditches is honest work too. But we do not ask the ditch digger to design the skyscraper, do we?" My father laughed again, a short, sharp bark of approval. "Ms. Mitchell," Brennan continued, clearly enjoying his performance, "your parents are worried. They believe that you are drifting, that you are not equipped for the burden of wealth. Looking at you, sitting there in your—" He paused, making a show of looking at my apron. "Uniform, I am inclined to agree." There it was. He'd said it. He had explicitly linked my employment to my moral and intellectual character. "A person who is content to wear an apron," Brennan said slowly, deliberately, "is rarely a person who has the discipline to wear the crown." Rachel was on her feet instantly. "Objection, Your Honor. The court is characterizing the defendant's employment as a character flaw, indicating a predisposition against—" "Sit down, Ms. Armstrong," Brennan snapped, his face flushed red. "I am not characterizing anything. I am stating facts. There is a hierarchy of competence in this world. There are people who lead, and there are people who serve. Your client has clearly chosen her lane." "I would like that noted in the record," Rachel said, her voice hard as iron, "that the court believes service workers are inherently incapable of leadership." The room went deadly silent. Brennan stared at Rachel. His eyes narrowed. He looked like a king who had just been questioned by a peasant. "You are treading on thin ice, counselor," Brennan hissed. "Do not lecture me on the record. I have been sitting on this bench for 20 years. I know a drifter when I see one." He turned back to me. "Ms. Mitchell, let us be done with this charade. You are a waitress. You are overwhelmed. Your parents want to help you. Why are you fighting this? Is it pride? Is it spite?" I looked at him, looked at the man who had been drinking scotch with my father 3 nights ago, who had promised to crush me. I decided to give him one last shovel to dig his grave. "It is not spite, Your Honor," I said. "I just want to prove that I am capable." "Capable?" Brennan laughed. "Capable of what? Memorizing the Daily Special?" He leaned back, crossing his arms, a smug grin plastered on his face. "Tell me, young lady, aside from knowing which fork goes where, what professional qualifications do you actually possess that would justify me handing you $3 million? He paused, letting the silence hang. "What qualifications do you have?" he repeated. "Besides the menu?" The courtroom waited. Every eye on me, waiting for me to stammer about my high school grades or my life experience. Brennan sat back in his chair, completely satisfied. He'd cornered me, asked the question that had no good answer. A waitress has no qualifications to manage millions. That was his point. That was the trap. I looked at Rachel. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. I looked at my parents. They were beaming. My mother was already reaching for her purse, ready to leave, confident the victory was sealed. I looked back at Judge Brennan. I let a moment of silence hang in the air. Long, uncomfortable. Forced everyone to lean in. "I have no qualifications that you would recognize, Your Honor," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. That is what I thought, Brennan said, reaching for his gavel. In light of the evidence presented. However, I said, cutting him off. Brennan froze. Excuse me? I said, however. The submissive waitress posture vanished. My shoulders squared, my chin went up. The country accent I'd been affecting, gone. The voice that came out now was the voice that had led the Harvard Law Review, crisp, authoritative, cold as ice. I do have a question about the procedure, I said. You are not here to ask questions, Brennan snapped. I believe I am, I said, raising my head fully, since you have questioned my education and my discipline. I reached down to the floor where my battered backpack sat, the backpack I'd been using all morning, that everyone had seen, that no one had thought twice about. Your Honor asked about my qualifications, I said. My voice was different now, commanding. So I would like to submit a few documents to answer your question. We are done with documents, Brennan said, banging his gavel once. Judgment is... If you render judgment without reviewing the defendant's evidence regarding capacity, Rachel called out, standing, it is an immediate mistrial and grounds for judicial misconduct. Brennan paused. He glared at Rachel. He knew she was right on the technicality. Fine, he spat. Submit your menus or whatever crayons you have drawn on. I unzipped the bag, slowly, deliberately. I did not take out a menu. I took out a thick, leather-bound portfolio, not the kind you buy at a drugstore. The kind you get when you graduate top of your class from the most prestigious law school in the world. I stood up. I did not walk like a waitress anymore. I walked like a litigator. I placed the portfolio on the judge's bench. What is this? Brennan asked, looking at it with disdain. That, I said, looking him dead in the eye, is the answer to your question. I asked for your qualifications, Brennan said. Yes, Your Honor, I said, and for the first time I smiled. It was not a nice smile. And if you look at the first page, you will see that my qualification is that I know exactly what the rule against perpetuities is. Do you? Brennan looked down. I watched the color drain from his face. I watched his eyes widen behind his glasses. He was looking at my Harvard Law degree, Harvard Law School. Juris Doctor, summa cum laude, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. He flipped the page. His hands were shaking slightly. Massachusetts Bar Admission Certificate. He flipped again. Letter of recommendation from Supreme Court Justice Patricia Morrison. I had clerked for her during my second summer. The silence in the courtroom was sudden and absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had just landed but not yet exploded. Brennan looked up at me. His mouth opened. No sound came out. The arrogance was gone, replaced by dawning, horrifying realization. He looked at the waitress in the flannel shirt and stained apron, and he realized he had just spent 20 minutes insulting a woman who probably knew the law better than he did. You, he stammered. You are... I am the waitress, Your Honor, I said, my voice ringing through the silent room. But I believe the term you are looking for is counsel. I turned around, looked at my parents. My father's jaw was literally hanging open. His face had gone from smug to shocked to pale in the span of 3 seconds. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. The handkerchief fell from her hand. The laughter was gone. The smugness was gone. Preston Caldwell was standing now, staring at the portfolio on the bench. Your Honor, this is... We were not informed. Not informed of what? I asked, turning to him. That the defendant in this case has a legal education? I was not aware I was required to announce my credentials when being sued by my own parents. I walked back toward my table, but I wasn't done. Now, I said, my voice cutting through the shocked silence, shall we discuss the definition of competence? Or should we discuss the definition of bias? Brennan stared at me. He looked at the recorder in my pocket. I'd deliberately let it become visible. He looked at the degree on his desk. He looked at the gallery where Daniel Cooper's camera had captured everything. He swallowed hard. Recess, he croaked into the microphone. Court is in recess. He slammed the gavel down, a weak, hollow sound, and practically ran into his chambers through the back door. But it was too late. The echo of the gavel hung in the air. And this time, nobody was laughing. For 3 full seconds, the courtroom was frozen in shocked silence. Then, it exploded. What the hell? She's a lawyer? Harvard? She went to Harvard? Did anyone know this? Preston was frantically flipping through his files, looking for something, anything that mentioned my education. There was nothing. Why would there be? I was the defendant, not the attorney. I had no obligation to disclose my credentials. My mother stood up, her face twisted. This is a trick. She's lying. Howard, she's... But Judge Brennan was gone. The door to his chambers was closed. My father just sat there, staring at me. All the color had drained from his face. He looked 10 years older than he had 5 minutes ago. Rachel stood, gathering her papers. All parties to chambers. Now. The bailiff looked confused. But the judge called a recess, and counsel for both parties has the right to address matters in chambers during a recess, Rachel said firmly. Now. We filed out. Me, Rachel, my parents, Preston, into the narrow hallway that led to Brennan's chambers. Preston was on his phone, typing frantically. Probably to his managing partner, explaining that the case had just exploded. My mother grabbed my arm as we walked. Sarah, what have you done? You humiliated us. You made us look like fools. I stopped walking, looked at her hand on my arm, then at her face. I did not make you look like fools, I said quietly. You did that yourselves. I pulled my arm free and kept walking. We crowded into Brennan's chambers. It was large, opulent, lined with law books that looked like they'd never been opened. Brennan was behind his massive desk. He'd taken off his robe. He was in his shirt sleeves, sweating. He looked up when we entered. His eyes were wide, darting between me and Preston and my parents. Sit down, he commanded. His voice lacked its usual boom. It sounded thin. We sat. My parents squeezed onto a leather sofa in the corner, looking like children called to the principal's office. I have reviewed the materials, Brennan said, tapping my portfolio. And I have been informed by the clerk that a motion has been filed containing inflammatory allegations. He looked at me. Young lady, I do not know what game you are playing, but bringing forged credentials into my court and threatening the bench with out-of-context recordings is a fast way to get disbarred before you even start. He was trying to bluff, trying to scare me, but his hand shook when he picked up his water glass. They are not forged, I said calmly. And the recording is not out of context, Rachel added. It is 5 minutes of uninterrupted conspiracy. Brennan's face went from red to pale. Recording? What recording? Rachel pulled out her phone. Would you like to hear it, Your Honor? Or should we save it for the Judicial Conduct Board? This is outrageous, Preston stood up. Your Honor, they are trying to intimidate. Sit down. Rachel's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Preston sat. Rachel looked at Brennan. We can make this go away, she said. If Sarah withdraws the motion, if we seal the record regarding this misunderstanding, you can recuse yourself quietly. Health reasons. Sudden migraine. The case goes to a new judge. We start over. No harm done. No harm done? I said. Everyone turned to me. Your Honor called me a drifter, I said, standing up. He mocked my employment. He stated on the record that people who serve are inherently incapable of leadership. He made a judgment about my competence based solely on my clothing. That is not what Brennan started. Should I play the recording from this courtroom, or should I play the one from Thursday night at Silvercrest? Brennan's face went completely white. My father made a choking sound. Preston looked between them. Thursday night? What happened Thursday? You were there, Mr. Caldwell, I said, turning to him. On the smoking terrace. You, my father, and Judge Brennan, discussing how you were going to poke me until I cracked, how the judge was going to dress me down so hard I'd be begging to go back to the kitchen, how he'd grant the conservatorship by noon. Preston's mouth fell open. We were just, that was not, it was conspiracy, Rachel said. Canon 3, Section B of the Judicial Code of Conduct. A judge shall not initiate, permit, or consider ex parte communications concerning a pending proceeding. She pulled out a document. This is the sealed motion I filed Friday morning. It contains the complete audio recording. The clerk has been instructed to unseal it if she observes manifest injustice in these proceedings. Which we did, said a voice from the doorway. We all turned. Claire, the court clerk, stood there holding a file. Judge Brennan, I observed you making multiple statements indicating bias based on the defendant's employment and appearance. I observed you making jokes at her expense. I observed you explicitly stating that service workers lack the capacity for financial management. She held up the file. Under court rules, that constitutes manifest injustice. I have unsealed the motion and forwarded it to the Judicial Conduct Board. Brennan's face went from white to gray. Claire, you can't. I can, and I did, she said. 20 years I've watched you treat people differently based on how they dress, where they work, who they know. This time, someone had proof. This will ruin me, Brennan said quietly. You ruined yourself, I replied. I walked over to his desk, placed my hands flat on the polished wood, leaned in. And regarding your threat to blackball me, I said softly, you seem to be operating under a misconception. What misconception? Brennan asked weakly. You still think I am the defendant? Preston jumped up. You are the defendant! No, I said, turning to face the room. I am the plaintiff in the ethics complaint I drafted this morning. Judge Brennan is the defendant. I pointed to the degree on his desk. You asked for my qualifications, Your Honor. Let me list them properly. I graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law School. I was the editor of the Harvard Law Review. I spent 2 years clerking for the Supreme Court of Massachusetts, specifically focusing on judicial misconduct and appellate procedure. Each statement landed like a hammer blow. Preston sank back into his chair. My father put his head in his hands. I did not just study the law, I continued. I specialized in probate and trust litigation. I wrote my thesis on the abuse of conservatorships by predatory family members. I looked at my parents. I know exactly what a blind trust is, Father. I know exactly how you planned to drain the liquidity into your shell companies. I traced the wire transfers you tried to hide and the consulting fees you charged Margaret. I know about every failed business venture you've had for 20 years. My mother made a small sound, almost a whimper. I turned back to Brennan. And I know exactly which canons of the Judicial Code of Conduct you violated Thursday night. I recited from memory. Canon 3, Section B. A judge shall not initiate, permit, or consider ex parte communications concerning a pending or impending proceeding. Canon 2. A judge shall avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all of the judge's activities. You did not just appear improper, Your Honor. You sold your verdict for a glass of scotch and a laugh at my expense. I stood up straight, smoothed my flannel shirt. You thought I was a waitress. You thought I was brittle. You thought I would crack. I walked toward the door. Well, I am not cracking. But looking at you right now, you look like you are about to shatter. Sarah, please, my father said, standing. We can fix this. We can all just… Fix what? I turned to him. The fact that you've been living on Margaret's money for 20 years while pretending to be entrepreneurs? The fact that you hired a litigator before she was even buried? The fact that you conspired with a judge to have me declared incompetent so you could steal my inheritance. We were trying to help you, Victoria shrieked. You were trying to help yourselves, I said. You always have been. Rachel stood. We are not withdrawing the motion. We are not sealing the record, and we are not settling. Then what do you want? Brennan whispered. I want it all, I said. I want the recusal. I want it stated in open court. I want the ethics board to have the full transcript of this meeting, and I want everyone in this room to understand something very clearly. I looked at each of them in turn. You gambled that I was weak, that I was incompetent, that I could be crushed by a little humiliation and some frozen bank accounts. You lost. 2 weeks later, the case reconvened, but everything was different. Judge Howard Brennan had recused himself, citing newly discovered conflicts of interest. The Judicial Conduct Board had opened an investigation. His career was effectively over. The case had been transferred to the state capitol, assigned to Judge Renee Calder. She was a visiting judge from another county, known for having ice water in her veins and zero tolerance for nonsense. My parents had fired Preston Caldwell. He was too toxic now, radioactive. They'd hired a crisis management firm that specialized in cleaning up messes for wealthy people who'd stepped in it. Their new attorney was Gerald Sterling, a gray-haired man who looked perpetually exhausted. I sat at the defendant's table in a charcoal suit, tailored, professional, my hair down, brushed smooth. My Harvard portfolio sat on the table in front of me, no longer a surprise but an anchor. The courtroom was different too, smaller. No gallery of country club friends, just the necessary parties and a few court reporters. Judge Calder sat on the bench like a statue carved from granite, reading files with laser focus that made lesser lawyers sweat. "Let us be clear," Judge Calder said, looking over her reading glasses. Her voice was not loud, but it carried terrifying weight. "I have reviewed the transcripts from the previous hearing. I have reviewed the recordings submitted into evidence. I have very little patience for theatrics." She looked at Sterling. "We are here to determine the validity of Margaret Reynolds's will in the capacity of the primary beneficiary. Do not waste my time with character assassinations." Sterling stood. He looked nervous. "Your Honor, we are merely suggesting that despite Ms. Mitchell's academic credentials, which we acknowledge are impressive, her recent behavior suggests instability. Working a minimum wage job while holding a law degree indicates—" "Or," Judge Calder interrupted, "it indicates a need to eat while her assets were frozen by your client's ex parte motion." Sterling closed his mouth. "Ms. Armstrong," Judge Calder said to Rachel, "please proceed." Rachel stood. She was brilliant. She did not scream or gesticulate. She dismantled their case with surgical precision. "Your Honor, we have submitted 3 affidavits from Margaret Reynolds's primary care physicians, all dated within 1 month of her passing. All 3 confirm she was of sound mind, oriented to time and place, and fully capable of making financial decisions." She placed documents on the clerk's desk. "The claim of dementia is a fabrication without a single shred of medical evidence. We also have testimony from the witnesses to the will, disinterested parties who confirmed Margaret was emphatic about her choices. The plaintiff's claim of undue influence relies entirely on the premise that Sarah Mitchell manipulated her grandmother." Rachel walked to the podium. "Yet records show Sarah was in Boston 90% of the last 2 years, while the plaintiffs lived 30 minutes away. If anyone had opportunity for influence, it was them." Judge Calder nodded, making notes. "And the employment issue," Rachel continued. "The waitress position that has been characterized as evidence of incompetence. Your Honor, I would like Ms. Mitchell to address this directly." I stood, walked to the podium. "Your Honor," I said clearly, "my parents froze my assets on October 15th. They cut off my access to my savings, my checking account, and any estate funds. I had bills to pay. I had food to buy. I did not take a job at Juniper and Rye Cafe because I was having a breakdown. I took it because I refused to go into debt. I refused to be leveraged." I looked directly at my parents. "I have a degree in fiduciary responsibility. The most responsible thing a person can do when their liquidity is cut is to generate immediate cash flow. I did not view the job as beneath me. I viewed it as necessary, solvent action." "My parents believe that manual labor is a sign of failure," I continued. "I believe that living on credit you cannot repay, to maintain an image, is the real failure." "I was not playing waitress, Your Honor. I was balancing my own budget." Judge Calder actually smiled. It was small, but it was there. "A novel concept in this court, Ms. Mitchell. Fiscal responsibility." She turned to my parents. They were shrinking in their seats. My mother looked old under the fluorescent lights. My father was gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. "Now," Judge Calder said, "I have reviewed the will and I have a question for the plaintiffs." She picked up the document. "There is a clause here, Article 7, the in terrorem clause, commonly known as the no contest clause." My father's head snapped up. I saw panic flash in his eyes. In their arrogance, in their rush to sue, in their confidence that Judge Brennan would hand them the keys, they had forgotten the fundamental trap Margaret had set. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Calder said to their lawyer, "you are aware of this clause? It states that any beneficiary who challenges the validity of this will forfeit their entire inheritance." Sterling loosened his collar. "Yes, Your Honor." However, we argued the challenge was made in good faith, based on probable cause regarding the decedent's capacity. But you have shown no probable cause, Judge Calder said sharply. You have shown rumors. You have shown bias. You have shown greed. You have not shown medical evidence. She leaned forward. So by filing this lawsuit, your clients have not only failed to prove the will is invalid, they have triggered the forfeiture clause. My mother let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. No, that cannot be right. We were just trying to help. Help whom? Judge Calder asked, her voice like a whip crack. You froze your daughter's ability to buy groceries. You hired a private investigator to photograph her at work. You conspired with a judge to have her declared incompetent. She looked at my father. Mr. Mitchell, answer me this. If you were truly concerned about your daughter's ability to manage the money, why did you not petition for a neutral third-party professional trustee? Why did you insist that you be the trustees? Why did you demand control? My father opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his lawyer, looked at me. He had no answer. There was no answer that did not sound like because we wanted the money. The silence is deafening, Judge Calder said. She banged the gavel. Judgment for the defendant. The will of Margaret Reynolds is valid and shall be entered into probate immediately. The petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice. There is zero evidence of incapacity on the part of Ms. Mitchell. In fact, she appears to be the only adult in the room. She was not done. Furthermore, due to the frivolous nature of this litigation and the bad faith demonstrated by the plaintiffs, including the documented attempt to collude with a judge, I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay all legal fees incurred by the estate and by Ms. Mitchell personally. And finally, she said, looking at the papers one last time, I am enforcing the no contest clause. The bequests to Richard and Victoria Mitchell are void. Their share is forfeited. She looked at me. Ms. Mitchell, the estate is yours, unencumbered. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck. It was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping. My parents did not move. They sat frozen, staring at the empty bench where the judge had been. They had walked in hoping for a settlement. They were walking out with nothing. Less than nothing. They now owed Rachel a significant amount of money for the legal fees. I packed my portfolio, shook Rachel's hand. Good work, Rachel said. I will draft the order. Go talk to them. I think you have one more thing to settle. I walked over to the plaintiff's table. My parents looked up at me. My mother's eyes were red. My father looked deflated, like a balloon that had lost its air. Sarah, my father said, his voice raspy, you destroyed us. That money, the bequest, we needed that. The winery project, the loans. There is no winery project, Dad, I said. I know about the debts. I know you are underwater. Then help us, my mother begged, reaching for my hand. We are your parents. You have millions now. You can fix this. Just write a check, please. We can start over. I looked at them. I felt a strange emotion. It was not hate. It was not love. It was pity. They were so small. I am not going to write a check, I said. Their faces crumbled. But, I said, pulling out a document I had drafted the night before, I am going to give you a choice. I placed the document on the table. The house in Dunhaven, the glass house. You live there, but the deed was in the Voss family trust. As of 5 minutes ago, I am the sole trustee. My father went pale. You own the house. I am your landlord, I said, and you are tenants at will. I could evict you tomorrow. I could sell it. I could turn it into a shelter. I pointed to the document. This is an agreement. It states that you will vacate the property within 30 days. You will leave it in pristine condition. Or, my mother whispered. Or, you can stay, I said. But if you stay, you sign this. It is a complete withdrawal of all claims. It is a non-disparagement agreement. It says you will never speak to the press about me again. You will never ask me for money again. You will never claim to have supported me. You will live in that house as guests of the charity I am setting up in Margaret's name. You will have a roof over your heads, but you will not own a single brick. You want us to live as charity cases? My father spat. In our own home? It was never your home, I said. It was Margaret's, and now it is mine. I leaned in close. Those are the terms. 30 days to move out and face your debts alone. Or stay, keep the roof, but admit you live there only because I allow it. Decide by morning. I turned and walked away. I walked out of the courtroom, down the long marble hallway, and out onto the wide stone steps of the courthouse. The sun was shining. It was a crisp November day. I took a deep breath of cold air, footsteps behind me. Sarah! It was my mother. She had followed me out. She stopped at the top of the stairs, desperate, her perfect facade finally cracked beyond repair. How can you do this? She cried. We are family. Does that not mean anything to you? After everything, we are still your family. I stopped, turned around one last time. I looked at the woman who had scheduled appointments to see me, who had laughed when the judge called me a waitress, who had tried to have me declared insane to pay off her credit cards. Family, I said, testing the word. Yes, she said, stepping forward. We share blood. We share a name. That has to mean something. That is biology, I said. That is not family. I looked past her toward the street where Jake was waiting in his truck to give me a ride back to the cafe to pick up my car. I looked at the courthouse where Rachel was filing the final orders. I thought of Margaret, who had saved me without asking for a receipt. Family is not the people who gave birth to you, I said, my voice steady and final. Family are the people who believe you are worthy, even when the whole courtroom is laughing. I turned my back on her. Goodbye, Mother. I walked down the steps. I did not hear her reply. I only heard the sound of the city, the sound of the wind, and the sound of my own footsteps walking toward a future that I owned completely. The gavel had fallen, the case was closed, and for the first time in my life, the silence was beautiful. That night, I sat in Margaret's study, my study now. I opened the cream-colored envelope, the one Margaret had given me months ago. When you're in a room full of people laughing at you, inside was a single letter, written in her precise handwriting. My dear Sarah, if you are reading this, you have won, not because you destroyed them, but because you refused to become them. The money was never the inheritance. The inheritance was the spine I gave you, the voice, the certainty that you deserve to be in any room, regardless of what you are wearing. You chose the apron not because you were broken, but because you were strategic. That is not survival. That is mastery. I am proud of you. Not for graduating Harvard, not for winning the case. I am proud because when they laughed, you did not crack. You calculated. Now build something worthy of that strength. Love. Margaret. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in my leather portfolio next to my Harvard degree. 2 tools, equally sharp. I looked around at the study, at the books, the maps, the life Margaret had built. This was mine now, all of it, not just the money, not just the house, the responsibility, the legacy, the chance to be the person Margaret had prepared me to be. I pulled out my laptop, started drafting the charter for the Margaret Reynolds Foundation, scholarships for students from working families, legal aid for people fighting conservatorship abuse, support for service workers pursuing education. I would use the hammer to build, not destroy, but I would never forget how to swing it. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows. Inside, I worked. The waitress had become the counsel, the silence had become beautiful, and the war, finally, mercifully, was over.